Hello, everybody, and welcome to ALD No Limits. I'm Christy with ALD.
I'm Ken with AMN. Our guest this episode is Kelly. Welcome to ALD No Limits.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank
We're
you.
thrilled to talk to you this afternoon, and we're excited for you to share your story. We've heard your story a little bit this past year at the ALD Connect annual conference, but we're excited to have you as a guest today and to really get into the nitty gritty of things. But first, Kelly, can you tell us about yourself, where you're from, and maybe some fun facts about yourself and your family?
Okay, absolutely. So I am Kelly Waterman. I am originally from outside Rochester, New York. I went to college at SU, Syracuse University, where I studied nursing. I then, after I graduated from college, my first job was actually at Mass General, which, as we get talking a little bit more, is so ironic because then I spend a lot of time at Mass General. And then fun facts about me is that I competitively figure skated as a youngster. I
Nice.
competitively was an equestrian, like all growing up and then all through college. So like tons and tons and tons of sports was like my whole thing growing up. What else could I tell you about me? That's pretty much it. I mean, after Mass General, though, I ended up moving to the New York City area, which is where I've basically been now for the past like 25 years. So I currently reside in New Jersey with my boys and I. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. For fun these days, what do I do? I get my nails done. I try to incorporate self-care, which is for years and years was hard to do. So it's like the little things you try to get in there. So
Definitely.
Absolutely.
that's
Love
it.
it.
Yeah.
So, how did you learn about ALD?
All right. So I had my two boys so even though I live in New Jersey, I had both of my children in New York State because I worked at a major cancer hospital in Manhattan. And so, while I was at work, it was easy to just scoot across the street to New York Presbyterian, Cornell. And so I had my older son in 2012, who actually, his name's Jalen, and he was born 2 months early on Christmas Eve, actually. He was a early Christmas present. And then I had my younger son in 2017, also at Cornell, New York Presbyterian, Cornell in Manhattan. And also I didn't know anything really about newborn screening at this point. I had never gotten a phone call. I didn't get any information about Jalen. It was one of those like no news is good news type thing. So it was not anticipated it would be any differently with my younger son. However, I got a phone call when I had a 1-week-old at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday, of course, saying that my son had tested positive for something called ALD, adrenal leukodystrophy, on newborn screening. They really, it was the pediatrician's office that had reached out, and they really couldn't tell me anything more other than please call this office now at New York Presbyterian, but the Columbia Hospital, which is across town in Manhattan. Just saying like, you need to schedule an appointment because you have to go do something called confirmation testing, which it was like just such a whirlwind. And again, it was like so late on a Friday. So the whole world was shutting down. So it's like all I had was Google, after a certain point. So I made a quickie appointment for Monday morning, first thing, for whatever this confirmation business was going to be. And then I just sat with my computer, and in 2017, it still wasn't that great on the internet when, speaking about ALD. So, my older son was 4 at the time. So I was convinced just all bad was happening. Like everything I was reading was definitely going to be happening. So, and this is also when I was like, oh my God, maybe it's a false positive. Like I didn't even know that much about the testing yet. But that said, and this is also interesting, like our story has a lot of interesting like twists and turns. So I have a cousin who's a pediatrician in Massachusetts, and I had called her, bawling, and she then went to work the next day and was blabbing my life story to the break room. And it turned out that there was a nurse there who had formerly worked in the leukodystrophy clinic at Mass General. And that nurse offered to put me in contact with a Dr. Florian Eichler, like immediately. And I was just like, absolutely, like, do you think she'd want to talk to him? I was like, hands down, 1000%, I want to talk to him like right now. And so, I will say Dr. Eichler picked up the phone like instantly. And so thankfully, I mean, as hard as the information was to hear, at least I got accurate and reputable information like right out of the gate. Like I only had to go that one night of Friday to Saturday with just Google before I was able to speak, to an ALD specialist and neurologist. So at that point, Dr. Eichler had, asked me, do you have any other children? How old, so Kyler's my youngest, that's my newborn screening baby. If the confirmation testing is positive, you need to get your older son tested and we'll go from there. So, oh yeah. So this is my little nugget these days. Yeah. But this is Kyler, my newborn screening baby. I actually, let's see, maybe we'll go back to the way beginning where it all sort of started. So this was my little Kyler baseline. I mean, I'm biased. He's the cutest.
Totally the cutest.
He's like the cutest 9-year-old I know. So this is a little out of order, but it'll make sense when I tell our story. So, my boys have always been very, very close. Like, so, I mean, all Jalen wanted was a brother. So back to this ALD and finding out more information and all that stuff. I decided to, and this is like a Jalen Kyler photo bombing. So cute. So I had decided to bring Jalen to the confirmation testing appointment. And I just remember when we got there, they were kind of just like, why did you bring this guy with you? Like, we're only interested in testing the baby. And I was like, well, actually, we're going to all get tested at the same time because I don't want to wait to find out that the highest risk person in my family right now, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to wait weeks because Jalen being 4 years old at the time, like, we really needed to know what was going on. And if he had the mutation, like, get an MRI stat, find out what's going on with adrenal function. So, in the end, it's so funny when I look back because some of the people that like I was emailing with and like the names on the newborn screening slip are actually now people that I consider friends, from the newborn screening lab in New York. And they were wonderful. They agreed to test us all at the same time. So 1 week later after that, I did get the phone call that, Kyler definitely was positive, which we knew was coming. Being that Dr. Eichler had, advised there really are essentially virtually very, very, very few false positives. And then we found out that Jalen had the mutation as well. And then also myself. And so at that point, I immediately called Dr. Eichler back and was like, we're coming immediately. I want to get that MRI. And the other thing too that's kind of weird in our story is there's always like a freakish like snowstorm or something happening.
So you're headed to Boston.
So we were headed to Boston because now, both boys, were confirmed to be positive as well as myself. And so, we raced up to Boston, even though there was a snowstorm, we made it. And then that's when Jalen had his first MRI, which thankfully came back all clear. The one thing I will say about Kyler, I mean, he was born in time to alert us this was even going on in our family. And, because without this known family history, it wasn't tested for prenatally. In fact, most of the tests that I had done, like just from peripheral blood sticks, they added ALD literally 6 months after I had Kyler. So it's like we just missed like some of these things along the way. But that said, we got there. The first MRI was clear, which that was already like, whew. However, what was interesting is that then they had also made an appointment for us to see the endocrinologist at Mass General, who was one of the endocrinologists who helped come up with the like best practices for these newborn screening babies. And so we saw her, and she was wonderful. And it turned out though that Jalen, like, so the test, the ACTH, lab that they test for as a adrenal function
Yeah.
measure. I mean, Jalen's numbers were like off the charts. So it's just like, again, like thankfully, like he had never gone into an adrenal crisis. Like we have no idea at what point maybe his adrenal glands stopped working. But like thankfully, again, Kyler just swooped in to like basically save everybody's life. And you'll see as our story continues. So thankfully, we immediately got Jalen going on hydrocortisone for his adrenal insufficiency. We then also got looped in with the most wonderful endocrinologist, who was also one of these doctors coming up with the best practices, but she was local to our area, Dr. Molly Regelman, who's amazing. Stuff is that we found out that, thankfully Jalen's MRI was clear. We got plugged in with endocrinology, which was great because the minute we got back to New York, or the New York, New Jersey area, we saw Dr. Regelman right away. So she's been I shouldn't say she's been with us. We've been with her since Kyler was 7 weeks old. And then, since Jalen was 4. That's basically how long we've been with Dr. Eichler as well. I mean, just a little bit earlier, Kyler was 3 weeks old when we met Dr. Eichler actually for the first time. So it's kind of how ALD all began. And so after all that initial like diagnosis and finding out information and racing here and there, we were told like, listen, everything's going to be fine. Like, do not worry. There's gene therapy, there's, allo transplants out there. It was sort of like advertised, to be honest with you, almost like it's like you just go to CVS and pick one up off the shelf if you need it. It was just kind of like, don't worry. And just go home and enjoy your baby. So like, things did settle down a little bit after that initial like month. The one part I will say, just going back to that confirmation testing though for a second, is that at the time, the local doctor here had just said to us, like, listen, we're going to do scans locally. Cause the doctor that we saw didn't know that I had, already established, like a therapeutic relationship with Dr. Eichler and his team. But he was just like, yeah, and just when your son's 18 months old, he'll just start doing Lorenzo's oil. That's it. And I was like, well, I mean, is that true? I mean, is that the standard of care? Like, I didn't even know at that time. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it was just so crazy. So, when we had met with Dr. Eichler at the time, he had said, like, there'd been like tons of, now experience with Lorenzo's oil and research and things like that. And it wasn't being found to be an effective, treatment and necessarily preventing childhood cerebral ALD. So he didn't think it would be something that we should necessarily pursue. And interestingly enough, like I still felt like I should do my due diligence though. And I called down to Maryland, and literally right at that point, they were shutting down the, the whole thing here in the States. And then it was basically, you could only get it, if you imported it from Europe or whatever.
yeah.
So that kind of made our decision for us just anyway about Lorenzo's oil. Cause I was like, being a nurse, I love, all that evidence-based this and that and that and that. But the decision was already made for us regardless. Cause it was sort of ending here. So so we went back to just trying to enjoy new baby, Jalen becoming a big brother. What we also did, though, is when we had met with Dr. Eichler and his team, they started asking us, though, about our family tree and, trying to figure out, are there other at-risk members of the family and things like that. And so when they started discussing more and more about how females are not just carriers, I was like, I'm going to have both my parents get tested, but this is for sure coming from my mother, like without a doubt. So, um, my mother, and we did ended up getting her tested, and she had the mutation, which I knew was going to be the case. But my mother had been a very symptomatic female starting in her early 30s. So she
Mm.
had started with a limp that started getting progressively worse, like, dragging her foot and tripping and falling. And so she went from like a cane to a walker, to a motorized scooter, like sort of relatively quickly, like within like 5 to 7 years, to be honest, like maybe 10 max. And she also had incontinence to urine. And at the time, nobody could figure out what was going on. We're talking about like ALD would never have been in the differential for a female in the 80s and 90s. So, or at least it definitely wasn't for her. So that said, she got, it's a very classic tale basically of like, you know, maybe you just have a back problem. Do you know what I mean? I mean, because she had an incidental finding of a bone spur. So it's like, here, have this back surgery because maybe this is at the level and that's what's affecting your continence and maybe you're walking. And then it was like, okay, she did that, but nothing got better. She kept getting progressively worse, but nobody knew she had this underlying, neuromuscular degenerative, disease going on. So as I say, my mother, like my entire memory of my mom had always basically been of her being disabled, because like I said, it was such kind of a rapid progression for her. And it basically was just like a lot of symptom management. And so it really wasn't until Kyler, I mean, we literally were all working backwards from the baby. And so it was wild. It was just a lot of information, like in a very short interval. Um, so that was a very long-winded beginning of our tale of how we found out about ALD and how it came to be in our life. I will say that once sort of that initial time period was over, I felt like then I wanted to start to connect with the community and find out what else, like where are the resources and like who can I reach out to. And so at the time, I remember there was like one big primary sort of support group on Facebook, but it was like a mix of the whole, like the whole gamut, you know what I mean? So it wasn't just newborn screening. It was like everybody,
Yeah.
and a lot of mishmash of stuff. And it was, I'll be honest, at times like really frightening, to like hear some of these stories because some people, were really just not doing well. And so it just, yeah, so that was basically, like where I started and then how I sort of decided that I wanted to get involved in like, um, learning as much as possible and trying to help others wherever I could, like being a resource for people to reach out to if they had questions to help, as best I could, in that way. I think as a nurse, that's probably why it's like therapeutic for me. And like, that's how it helped me process what was going on. I mean, yeah, so that's basically how I got going with sort of, starting to network and meet people and it ultimately, like for instance, what led me to like meet you guys,
Yes. We're glad you did that. And
Well,
That's right.
community is
Lucky for us.
well,
community
thank
is
you. I feel
very
like I'm the
important.
lucky one, but no, thank you.
Thanks for sharing that story. The initial diagnosis, it's like, first of all, having two children with ALD and then being diagnosed yourself, and then, the reckoning with, your mom's
Mhm.
diagnosis as well.
Right.
That's just so much to take in all at once.
It was a
Yeah.
lot. It was a lot at the time. I can't lie. And then, everybody, I think it's individual also how you process, your feelings of like for me, I mean, I know that I felt a lot of guilt, right? Like even though I had no idea prior to my son's birth, um, I just still felt so guilty. You know what I mean? Like, oh, But, and everyone would tell you, like, there was no way you could have known, like, it's not your fault and this, that, but you still just, I don't know. I think it's part of your brain trying to just like you're trying to reason and reason and reason and reason and be like, why is this happening?
Right.
So it's tough because it's like you have a newborn baby. And like you said, in my case, I had an older, child. So it's like you're trying to manage just all the normal stuff, right? But then you're trying to process all of this and then your own feelings. But you're also like, I feel like a lot of parents, like right from the beginning, you just are in go mode. Like you're in like survival mode. Like I will just figure this out and do whatever I have to do to save my children, no matter what. And you just start immediately almost living in this state of like hypervigilance.
Yep.
Like trying to figure out, like, kind of always what's the next step and what's the next thing I need to do. And we also had to settle into what it was like to now live your life scan to scan, right? So it was like, we're going to scan every 6 months. And after you got over that initial like euphoria and happiness, like, I just got a clear result. Yay. But then it's like you restart the clock.
Right.
And that also, is hard. It's a lot
So
hard
hard.
to process. And one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I'm hoping it's getting, I would like to see it get better, and I think that it is. But I just feel like in the beginning there was very little sort of psychosocial support, not from other families and parents and other family members, things like that, from people who had been through this and wanted to help others, but more so on like, say, the professional side. And I don't know that it's like through any fault of their own. I just think that it was like, okay, well, now we have a way to test for this. You know what I mean? And like, we're trying to get the states out the best information, the most accurate information. Then like you're trying to streamline the process basically. But I think it was hard, like initially for states to be like, okay, well, this is how we're going to handle it, I guess. And then over here, it would be like, this is how we're handling it. And it wasn't always the same. And when people would get together and share their stories, there was a lot of these feelings of like how you found out, how you got the information, where did you go next for, like support. I mean, it wasn't like I met a social worker right from the beginning or anybody who was there like, let me sort of try to help you, get through this process. It was just a lot of, it's very, I mean, as I say, I think it's improving, but at the time it was just very parent driven, and family member driven, like how you sort of got through things. And I think that's why, this community is so, it's so interesting. Like it's so unique, I think, in how we support each other, and unique in the sense like wonderful, you know what I mean? Like it's a club that none of us really want to be in, of course. But I think that like when we all come together, like we really do try to support each other, and I think really well, for the most part. I think I think it's really great how that network and that formed very early. Because I mean, honestly, I don't know what I really would have done with like a lot of the other like mothers that I was speaking to at the time. I mean, they really helped me get through a lot of those early weeks, months, like anyway. So that's why I started to want to be, a support to people, like, when people would have questions in those support groups and things like that, Yeah. So, yeah. So that was sort
definitely relate to that piece of things, the connection with family.
Right.
Or, other families who have ALD.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, go ahead, Ken. You were going to ask a question.
No, I don't think so. No. There might have been one on the tip of my tongue, but it left. It might come back.
Well, I can just say that in continuing on our journey, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we were a year into our journey, and everyone was being monitored appropriately. We had settled into the every 6 months thing. Now, mind you, only like one other scan. When I say every 6 months, like we're only talking about like 2 more scans had occurred. But we were a year into our journey when my older son Jalen was found to have lesions on his MRI, and I'll never forget that day because it was like Dr. Eigler came in and just I could already tell like everyone's faces were just different, and he was like, Jalen has cerebral ALD, like we see a lesion, and so of course you're devastated. I mean, devastated. But it was also like, well, now what are we going to do though? Because the first version of the gene therapy trial had just closed to accrual. So they were not accepting any more patients at the time. And that was after, remember in the beginning, it was, don't worry, this will be fine. This will always be here if you need it. Like, it's going to be okay. And then in addition to that, my children are of mixed race. And so, you don't always have great representation in the National Marrow Donor Registry. And that really was the case with Jalen. He had no perfect matches. And, even his mismatches, I mean, again, this is like above my pay grade as far as like science goes, but where the mismatch was and things like that, like none of those donors were going to be good for Jalen. So it was just like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And so that was also a wild time. So it was, we want to get a MRI in a short interval. So it was like, we're going to scan again in 3 months. And then, when we did that, if we thought 6 months was excruciating, like once you know that you have a lesion, then waiting to get to the next scan is just like, oh my God, like time was on turtle. I mean, it was just like, oh, it was excruciating. But that said, when Jalen had that next MRI, it did show contrast enhancement, which, is sort of the impetus for then transplanting. And so then it initially was from Dr. Eichler's team, we're going to send you to Germany because we're going to try and get gene therapy there. However, in the end, Germany, that site wasn't able to get up and running the way they had planned. And so they sent us to England instead. So it literally was like, I'm packing up now with my 5-year-old. I was told that we could potentially be there for like 6 months, right? I mean, it was going to be a haul. But at least, we could possibly get it there. And so we were like, we will do anything and everything to save Jalen's life. So we did. We took off to England and, we got through all the pre-transplant workup and things like that, except for on their MRI, Jalen did not have contrast enhancement.
And now, hang on a second. You go to England.
All the questions, bring it.
Do you bring your baby? Who are you? It's just you.
It was just Jalen and I to start. Anthony and Kyler had to stay back here because the other thing too is, he had to work. Like this was my then husband, now ex-husband. So he was working. I also, now when I look back at it in retrospect, it was like complete insanity. So with my job, even though I'm a nurse, which actually, I don't remember if I even said that in the very beginning. I'm a nurse. Although, yeah, no, I did because I said I worked at Mass General. But that said, I, at this point in my career, had a behind-the-scenes job. So I was verifying chemotherapy orders for compliance. So it was all computer-based. So I was fortunate enough that at the time, they gave me a laptop and let me just keep my show going on the road overseas. So, yeah, it was just Jalen and I. We would do medical all morning long. And then with the time difference, I would start my work day like halfway through the day. And then I would just work like all night, all afternoon and night. I would take breaks to obviously like Jalen and I would get out, And I will say the one good thing about London is there were so many parks like within the city. So there was always like something to do with Jalen. But yeah, I mean, like Netflix and those parks were like how we were surviving. I don't think I ever slept Because like I said, I was just like doing all the medical in the morning and then doing my, job all the rest of the day. Um, it was like a really, really wild time. Yeah. So there was a lot to answer your question. No baby. It was hard to leave my baby.
Wow.
And
Mm,
then, because at that point, I didn't even know for how long I was going to be leaving my baby, to be honest with you. And then, lots of FaceTiming though. Lots of FaceTiming is how we sort of got through. But it was rough. It was really rough. Yeah. Yeah. It was not like the tourist vacation.
yeah.
It was a bonkers time. But as I was saying, on their MRI, Jalen was not showing contrast enhancement. So then they were like, and by they, like the doctors over in England were just like, all right, well, okay, you just gotta go home. That's it. That's it for you. And I was like, wait. Because now we had gotten in our mind, like, this is what we're doing. This is how we're saving his life. So for all of it to abruptly get shut down, right? It was just like, that also was so overwhelming. And so, yeah, I mean, we had to come home. We sat in limbo for 6 months while they wrote the next version of the trial, ALD 104. It had to get through the IRB at the hospital, which is like the internal review board, where they monitor all that stuff. And I mean, it was like excruciating though, because not only am I a nurse, I'm an oncology nurse. So we don't like to sit on things. We don't like progression, like that was awful. And then in the midst of all that, my mother actually passed away during
Mm,
that time period as well. So
Yes.
it was just really like a rough time. But we did eventually make it. And Jalen became patient number 1 for ALD 104 back here in the States with our team in Boston. And for that, I was really grateful. As hard as it was to do all that waiting, it was really nice though to be back with like our core team.
yeah.
Um, and I can't say enough good things about Christy Duncan and Boston Children's. I mean, it's a phenomenal place. It really was and is. Um, and so yeah, so then it was like the start of the next chapter of now transplant with Jalen. But yeah, that was also just a long wait, and it was a lot. It was a lot. I can't lie. But Jalen, was phenomenal. Like here actually, as we're talking, let me find that cutie pie. Okay, so here was sort of Jalen, like when we were in the hotel, pre-transplant stuff. But this was the day of Jalen's transplant. So they let me press the start button on his infusion to have his life-saving, transplant.
So
And
cool.
also, it was like wild at the time because I was like, it was just this tiny little volume of like clear cells, and you're like, that's it. This is what's going to do all the magic. It was really amazing.
Uh,
But yeah. So, but I gotta say, Jalen, he powerhoused through transplant. I mean, he was tough. He was really tough.
And
Uh,
how old was he?
he was 6 now when he finally gets transplanted. And the other thing too is, I know people like to get very, um, into less scores and this is and that's right. So, Jalen was like a 1. When we initially were told, that he had to have a transplant. And even after a whole year of waiting, he really didn't, his less score really didn't change that much. I mean, that's how early a pickup it was, thanks to Kyler. Again, back to my little nugget and like, giving us all this information. So, um, you know, what Jalen had, I've been referring to as gene therapy, but that's where you use your own, it was on a clinical trial, you use your own cells where they correct the mutation in a lab, and then you get your cells back. And, it's thought that, the big benefit of that is that then you're not at risk for graft versus host disease.
yeah.
So but that also, I mean, listen, we were so grateful to be with our team and get it done and all that, but it still wasn't easy. I mean, Jalen was young, he was 6. And so to be like thrust into isolation, that was tough for him. He really, it just was like these children, they need support as well, right? And you do the best you can as a parent, but it's a lot to process, I think at any of these ages. And I think what also is important is instead of, because at the time when he would have rough days, they would try to just like medicate him in in their way of dealing with it. Whereas I think like a big part of what would be helpful is like play therapy and like stuff like that, and not just medication, right? But
Yeah.
that's another whole discussion we can get into, and questions how I feel about that. But Jalen really, I mean, like you see his face, like even when he was having rough days, he like tried to put on a nice smile and do the best he.
Oh,
So where can I find another one of my guy? So like for instance, well, let me go back. So this was like during transplant. So we were put up in an apartment in Boston. Um, we were like on I don't even remember. It was like a really high floor though at the time. And I was just like, this is like a beautiful view and all these things. And poor Jalen was just like, but we can't go anywhere. He felt like a caged animal. Like,
oh,
and but we tried to have a lot of fun. I mean, listen, I stepped on a lot of Legos during that those 6 months because I was like, anything for you, pal. Like, just let's try to keep you, happy and motivated.
yeah.
So this actually is when we first came home. So my ex-husband and Kyler, thankfully, because it wasn't as far away as England, they used to come up and visit us every week, like every single week. So my ex-husband, in between his working, would then drive to Boston, spend a few days with us. We would swap. So he would go into the hospital and hang with Jalen. I would then hang with Kyler, try to get in my time with my little one. And that's just kind of how we got through it. But so this right here was Jalen, day plus 100. This was like a big day for him. This is little Kyler actually at a fundraiser when he was really young. But yeah, so let's see what else we have here. Oh, let me go the other way. So yeah, that was basically how we finally got to transplant. And at the time we were like, okay, this is it. Like, we have saved Jalen's life after all that waiting. Perfect, like wonderful. But after a certain point, of course, you go home, and then it's how do I manage all these things locally, right? Because a lot of these, the patients, they're not only like all over the country, but you get international patients as well. And so that's another whole, hurdle of things that you have to try to navigate is, okay, what do you do when you get back? And like, who do you need to follow up with? And how, and then how do you manage school and vaccinations? And there's just a lot to it post-transplant. So in your mind, you're just like, okay, we saved his life. But then it's like the next chapter of all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's like where I'll pause for a second so that if you have other questions. Otherwise, I certainly can keep going. I mean, I could talk about my boys forever, like hours and hours and days.
Yeah.
You say day 100. Day
Mhm.
1 started when?
So, leading up to transplant, you get chemotherapy to basically wipe out your bone marrow so that then when you're getting your new cells, it's almost like you're getting, well, it's not almost, you're getting like a new immune system.
Yeah.
So, you have to be in isolation during those periods because your blood counts get very low. In fact, they want your white count to get to like 0. So day of transplant is, day 0. And then every day moving forward is day plus. So it's day plus 1, day plus 2, and every day, the further you get out from transplant, it's like the better. Cause it's like, you start to look for the cells to come back in. You start to, be able to maybe possibly do more, like maybe now we can get out of the house a little bit, but masked and not with a bunch of people close by, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. So it's like every day that you move forward, it's like working more towards like a graduation almost. But yeah, that's the plus business. Yeah.
So yeah, and I've seen other families when they're communicating about it, whether they're posting something or talking about it. So thanks for the clarification on that.
Of
Where are we now? So this picture was plus 100.
So that's day plus 100.
Fast forward.
Well, so then see this picture right here?
Ah,
So we were 6 months post transplant. And Jalen, I mean, he had had a wonderful summer because we had done transplant. Basically, we had started the whole process in January because that's when you go and you do the whole pre transplant workup. And then that's when they do the stem cell collection. And then you have a little break while they're working on what they have to in the lab. And then you get admitted to the hospital. And then basically that's when you're there for a long period of time because it's the inpatient stay, but then you have to stay locally to be around your doctors because you're going to clinic like two times a week at least, and then you start to graduate and move it further out to maybe once a week. But by that whole time this stuff is done, we didn't get home until June, so it's a long process. And so that said, Jalen had this great summer. Dr. Duncan, had liked his blood counts and was like, yes, go enjoy life. And because it's a little different when you have an autologous transplant versus an allogeneic transplant. So whether you're having, your own cells or cells from somebody else. But, come October that year, so he started school again in September. Now Jalen was going to be in first grade. So that was another whole piece, actually, is that during Jalen's transplant, he missed half of kindergarten. And as our story goes on, that's another big piece besides the medical is the education and the school and how you deal with these things as well. So we were only a month into first grade when Jalen, we would pick him up from school and he had clearly had, an accident, either to urine or stool. And we were kind of just confused because we're like, why are you letting him sit like this all day long, And the school it was a confusing time for Jalen because they were trying to say that, at recess, he's just so busy having fun that he's not remembering to go to the bathroom. And I was like, see, that's not my son. I mean, even when he was getting chemotherapy, I mean, this is kind of graphic, but like diarrhea pouring out of him, he still was dragging himself to the bathroom. And he was only 5 and 6 years old. So for this to be happening, I was like, this doesn't make sense, like at all. And I was frantically writing our team, in Boston. And, some of the thoughts were that, maybe it's just because he's, stressed or, it's just a lot on him. And I was like, yeah, but see, like, like as a mom, you just like know your people. You're like, I was like, I've known Jalen for some time now. And I'm telling you, I don't think it's just that he's stressed out, or at least that's not how he manifests being stressed out. And so after a week, though, he woke up on the weekend with a limp. And I was freaking out because I was like, all of that screams like way bad, like way neuro-y and bad. So, I took him to the ER back in New York City. And, after a big workup, it turned out that Jalen had something called transverse myelitis happen, which is, that can happen actually to anybody at any age. It's a non-traumatic spinal cord injury. So, I mean, essentially the best way to describe it is his body, for whatever reason, thought it was picking up on something foreign and was like, I have to attack you. I have to attack. But it was his own spinal cord. So that ended up affecting his ambulation and ultimately his continence. So in this picture, this is where Jalen is at inpatient acute care rehab because after and that was another whole really rough for Jalen because he got thrust back into the hospital, back into isolation, back, and he was like, I just, got a taste of real life again. What's happening? So it was really, really rough. And then, Kyler was so cute. He thought he actually worked there. That's why that little badge on his neck, he was like, I'm going to be a little security guard. And he used to like make his rounds on the floor. He's very, very funny
Love
guy.
that.
But yeah, so that, I mean, it was, so that was another, like, just so horrible, like bad luck. You know, it just, like, this was a kid who, I mean, he was always running. So to now not be able to run and not be able to go to the bathroom the way he, you know, knew how to go,
Yeah.
really, really, really tough. And the other thing too is this acute inpatient rehab business. You know, Jalen was now being exposed to very medically complex children in all various states of complexity. And that was really scary for him. And I remember also, like, because remember, he's only 6 years old. You know, he would hear machines and the beeps and the blips and the, you know, all of that. It was just, it was a lot for him to process. However, I will say that at this rehab, though, we ended up meeting a young lady who, and she's still a part of our life, and her family, like, we all became very, very close. So she was much older. You know, it's a pediatric hospital, and I think she was already 20 at the time. But, you know, they had already had her admitted before, so she had a spinal cord injury as well, and they were working on getting her walking back and things like that. And she just had this connection with Jalen that was amazing. And he really needed it at the time. I mean, he was so miserable. So her name's Carly. And not only was she such a great support for Jalen, but like she and I ended up becoming, you know, very close. And she's such a remarkable young lady. And so as I say, as a result, we ended up becoming very close with the whole family. It turned out they only lived 20 minutes away from us. So it was just really nice. And that was one big, big positive to come out of being in that rehab. For sure. He's like, Mom, why do you always make these noises at me? Right? This is what moms do, Kyler. This is what moms do, the silly noises, right?
Yeah.
He's a handsome boy.
He's
Jalen had a friend in the hospital. That is awesome. How nice.
He sure did. As did Mom. Like, that whole family, I mean, like, I cannot impress upon just how, like, crucial they were to, like, my surviving, to be honest with you. I mean, because it was just like one thing after another. And as I say, we're still very close with that family to this day. And just, like, we love them dearly. I mean, beyond dearly. But, you know, we've been going on with Jalen for a long time now, right? So we leave no man behind, though. So Kyler was getting ready to have his standard of care 3-year-old scan, you know, towards the end of, like, when Jalen finally was getting discharged again and we finally were going to, like, come home and whatever. So the thing is that Kyler is born at the end of February, and the end of February leading into March of 2020 was the start of COVID.
Yeah.
So that's when things also got next level crazy for us. So on Kyler's 3-year-old standard of care, that little cutie in the picture right there, he like bomb dropped on his MRI. So he had multiple areas of demyelination. They were already giving him a less score of like 4. And it was just like, how did this happen from 2 to 3? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's such a dramatic change.
Yeah.
And as I say, like, it just felt like one blow after another, you know, it's just like you're trying to go from thing to thing to thing to thing, you know, just like, just constantly trying to like save these boys, right? So in Kyler's case, since the whole world was shutting down, and it was thought that we really needed to move to transplant very quickly. So even if gene therapy had been an option, it really kind of wasn't, because we didn't have that whole big like 6 months to sort of like, we needed to get moving and like now. So thankfully, unlike his brother, Kyler did have multiple matches out in the registry. So he ended up having 3 perfect bone marrows and then multiple cord blood options. When I say cord blood, so that's umbilical cord, stem cells. And so in the end, and the other thing too is that, again, it's like we can't really get to anywhere like easily with the whole world shutting down. So Kyler ended up having his transplant here closer to home so in the end, they went with a international cord blood stem cell donor. At the time, that's all they could tell me. It's just that it's an international cord. It's just that ultimately, when I requested his records and was able to read more about it, Kyler got the stem cells from a little baby in Barcelona, Spain. That's where his donor came from. Which even with that, I mean, it was like wild because again, COVID, we were like time crunch. Like, are these cells going to get here in time? I mean, I want to go with the best match possible. So that also was a lot. But from time of diagnosis for Kyler having cerebral ALD to when he gets transplanted, it was only 6 weeks. I mean,
Wow.
they moved really quickly. Yeah. And Kyler and I got admitted the day the quarantine started. So like we literally like got in the hospital and that was it. Like the whole world shut down really. So it was a lot. It was a lot to say the least. But in a much different way than how Jalen's experience was going. So Kyler, he was 3 at the time, and he was ahead or on time for all milestones going into transplant. I just look at that little face. Kyler was so verbal. I mean, he used to tell me that the dustbuster had to be plugged in to be charged. I mean, he also was like kind of a neat freak. So, I mean, like that's how verbal my little guy was. And so we got admitted on March 20th. The last time I heard my son speak to me was March 27th of 2020. So he came out nonverbal, non-ambulatory, and we were told that he was blind. So, I mean, like, where do the questions even begin with this one, right? So it just was a very complicated course. I feel like time in history, like even medicine, just how the whole world was operating during COVID was just yikes. I mean, just yikes. So so it was really, 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 really tough because there were, and I'm really just like not even because we don't have that many hours right now, I'm sure. But I'm sort of skimming over just how truly, truly challenging it was and agonizing because
Right.
I was just like watching things happen that I was like, I don't understand what's going on. Because again, you got to figure my version of COVID isolation and quarantine was different than everybody else's because I already was in isolation with a transplant patient. So it was just like surreal. It was very weird. But at the same time, I was watching my son lose like abilities like so quickly, and
Right.
it was rough. It was rough.
Can
Now,
I
yep, go ahead.
So at this point, so your mom here, this kind of goes into like the mom part. Like you're very busy with ALD, but at this point, that had to have been tough. Like,
Yeah.
just taking it all. Yeah.
Yeah, it really was. And it's interesting that you asked me that question because it's actually a very important one. Because I just found that I was like for so long just going thing to thing to thing to thing
Yeah.
to thing, just putting out fire, trying to put out fire, like what's next? Or like, how do we do this and that you don't always have time to process, right?
Yeah.
And really, deal with like what's going on. I mean, even with Jalen, it was just like, I got to rush you to the ER. I don't want you to end up, having no ability to walk, right?
Yeah.
Or even with Kyler, it was just like, what is happening and where is like my little man disappearing to, right?
Right.
But I will say that I follow my kids lead, right? So it's like I'm definitely a realistic person, right? So I'm not someone I just want to hear what I want to hear. Like I work with the news that we have and I work with what we have, but I also like, how do I explain it? It's like, I guess this is the way I feel about it in nursing. You've got the scans, the labs, the numbers, but then you've got the person in front of you. And that's honestly
Yep.
the most important thing, right? So I would just look at like my little Kyler and I was just like, I just know like we could be doing better. Or I know like it would drive me, you know what I mean? Like he's so resilient. And let me see if I can get some other pictures up here for you. So like this right here was like just less than a month before he gets admitted for transplant. Because this was Cupid's wingman. So it was like Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so we live in a lake community. So here he was like hanging out at the lake. But you know, so when you look at and this is Jalen, you know, after the spinal cord injury, like different standards and things they would put him in to help him stretch, you know, but like for instance, this picture right here, like this was a really tough time. So Kyler had gotten admitted in March, like I mentioned. So his transplant was March 31st. So, I mean, spoiler alert, Kyler's still here and he's amazing. So he just, as we were discussing before taping, he is now 6 years post transplant. And Jalen's about to be 7 years post transplant tomorrow. So it's like I can smile about this now, but at the time here, you know, he had already not been speaking since March, and this is now November. This was a week before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And although I gotta say, I was really pushing that kid. So I had gotten him back to standing. He was like not walking, but you know, like he was actually doing pretty well. Until he got really sick and he had this complication called autoimmune hemolytic anemia, which is something that also can happen with transplant patients. And that's a very serious, you know, diagnosis. So it's almost like where his body's like chewing up its own red cells basically, and your hemoglobin's dropping like precipitously and very quickly. But it also at this time we were being told, and like this is tough because I mean it's like it's what happened. It's our truth. I mean, I can't change this part, but we were told very inappropriately so. You know, for instance, just the doctor, you know, a fellow in tow, and then Kyler and myself, just at the end of the bed, like, you know, I think your son's actively dying. Good luck. Like, it's gonna be a feat to get him home before Thanksgiving. And it was just like, uh,
Wow.
like that's just not even if that's what you think is going on, that's not how that kind of a conversation is
No.
held. And that's not the supports that you should have in place. So because of what that doctor said, it sort of scared everybody into thinking this was going to be a reality. So after months of, you know, Jalen, my older son, not being, and my ex-husband not being able to come to the hospital and actually visit us, like really visit us. I mean, I
Yeah.
used to go see Jalen down at the entrance of the hospital, like in the car when I would exchange laundry. I mean, that's like how I saw my son for months outside of FaceTime. And, but right here, this picture, that was when they were like, oh no, like this is what they say is happening. So we're going to make an exception and have them come because this might be your last Thanksgiving together. And it was so crazy. And so this picture of Jalen, you know, kissing Kyler, it's
There.
poignant. It's poignant. And it was a very rough time. Now I will infuse just a little bit of humor for a second. I mean, funny, but like not funny. Oh, and this is also Kyler baseline. But so this soul right here, her name's Lexi. And because Kyler was, you know, gonna meet his demise apparently very quickly, out of nowhere, it was like he has to have his make-a-wish like right now. And his wish is that he gets a puppy. And I was like, wait. I'm like, you just delivered this other crazy Bonkerville news, right? And I mean, trust me, we're animal people, but I was like, but you think I need a puppy? Like right now, I need a puppy? Like that kind of responsibility, right? On top of the fact, like, I don't get a dog as a consolation prize, right? For what you just said is going to happen to my human. It was so crazy. But like once you say things in front of children, it's like you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. You know what I mean?
Nope.
So that also is crazy because again, it's still COVID. So Make-A-Wish uses a website called Puppy Spot, and it's just like tons and tons and tons of cute puppies, and it's like, how do you pick, right? So we were like, okay, you're gonna be the one, but you don't know where the dog's coming from. So it turned out Lexi's from South Dakota.
Oh, wow.
We were like you can't even make this stuff up, I swear. So again, remember how I told you weather plays a part in a lot of like our adventures?
Yeah.
So it was like December and they were like, yeah, we're going to fly this dog to you. Meanwhile, I have so much else going on. And now I'm like preparing for this puppy, right? However, again, there was a freakish snowstorm. So she couldn't fly. And so there was a couple where they just drive dogs to their forever homes. And so they brought Lexi and some of her siblings across the country and they just dropped them off at their various homes.
Oh,
And so
wow.
that's how we got Lexi Lou.
Oh.
I mean, and honestly, like it was such a crazy time in our life, but in the end, she ended up being like such a blessing. I mean, she brought us so much happiness. A lot of work, but a lot of happiness as well.
Fair warning to our listeners.
Right? She
Fair warning about dogs. They are a lot of work. Yes.
you know what I'm saying?
Adorable.
But they're joyful. Yes.
They are, but Lexi like was a puppy for 1 millisecond and then she turned into a pony. I mean, she's a big girl. She's a big girl. So,
So you
also
still have Lexi.
we do still have Lexi Lou. We do. Yep. Yep. She is what, 6 now? So, as I say,
Can I go back?
Yep.
I have a question.
Of course.
I want to go back for a second.
Yep.
First of all, I need to just acknowledge, like, we've acknowledged this before, but like how much craziness happened all at once. Shaylin gets diagnosed with cerebral, you go to England, you come back, he gets gene therapy, your mom passes away in the middle of all of that. And then your baby Kyler gets diagnosed and he goes through treatment. That is a lot.
COVID.
And not only does he go through treatment, but it's a challenge. The treatment is a challenge. So I'm just curious about all this. Like, it sounds like from what you said, the MRI showed significant progression.
With Kyler.
And with Kyler.
Yeah.
And then he went through transplant and he doesn't talk again. He doesn't walk again. And so what was the explanation around all of that? I'm just guessing, like, for me, I'm curious. I'm sure our listeners are curious. Like, I thought newborn screening was supposed to, prevent, progression like this.
Right. I mean, these are excellent points. Because in addition to everything else you just said, like also doesn't eat food again anymore, gets a G tube, just so many things, right? So yes, so that's how I also had been, told newborn screening was going to work for us, right? Like you should be able to see lesions on scan long before somebody's symptomatic.
Right.
And in Kyler's case, I mean, it's really crazy we're even talking about this because I was showing a video to one of his nurses just today of like right before transplant where I was panicking because Kyler became somewhat symptomatic just 3 weeks later after the MRI. So he started toe walking, slurring his speech, which already was a little complicated because he was only 3, right? So he's not talking like the rest of us right now, but he really
Yeah.
was like, he just was having a lot of issues. And even with all that, it's still thought we need to rush to transplant versus like switch gears and perhaps maybe he's not a candidate, you know. But his lust score was still low enough. He was compensating in a lot of other ways. And so, you know, it's tough. It's tough when I tell this story because it's like I know what my experience was being at the bedside every day for hours. I mean, I never left him. Like we were essentially in the hospital for like a year with very few, like maybe 2 weeks here, a week there where we had come home. And you know, a lot of it was always, I feel like when people can't explain something, they're just like, it's got to be ALD. It's just got to be the ALD, you know, like, especially when people don't understand it as well either. So
Yeah.
I will say that, yes, there was progression of the disease because the other thing too is like, you know, with these transplants, of course, you want them to work sooner than later, but they don't just work immediately. It's almost like when you think of like the speeding freight train going down the tracks and like in the movies they put on the brakes, you see sparks flying. It's
Yeah.
not like it comes to a halt like in 1 millisecond. Like it takes a little bit to get to that screeching halt. And so that's kind of how that works with this is, you know, it can take anywhere from like, you know, a year to 18 months on average. Again, you always hope that it's going to work sooner than later and halting the progression of the disease. I mean, because on scan, it was showing like no contrast enhancement. You know what I mean? Like the cells had gotten up to where they needed to, and at least the inflammation had gone away. But yet he was losing all these things, you know, and so I don't know. There's been all sorts of theories. I mean, I think it's as a parent a combination of yes, disease progression, but then there also was just a lot of complicated medicine going on during COVID. I mean, I guess is the best way and most politically correct way I can like probably
Yeah.
discuss it right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because it was just like, yeah, it was like so rough. But that said, you know, like because again, like support services weren't coming in as frequently at the time because of COVID. So like you weren't getting speech therapy like probably as much as someone would when it wasn't COVID. You know, PT was coming by, OT was coming by, but again, probably not at the frequency with which it would during maybe another time in history. So I would do a lot of work with him at the bedside, you know, like I was always working with him. And I remember like we had gotten him eating a little bit again at one point. As I said, he was standing. But when he was 10 months post transplant when Kyler abruptly lost his vision. And I think that was like a real tipping point for Kyler and for us during like this chapter of really, really rough. Because to abruptly lose your vision like that, it was so traumatic. I mean, again, he was still only 3 at the time. You know, but there were times when like there would just be news delivered to us that made no sense, right? Like, so like when I told you that horrible, you know, discussion that was had a week before Thanksgiving, you know, which prompted us to get Lexi Lou. You know, at the time it was so devastating because it was like, well, not only is this what we think is happening, but you know, that physician went on further to be like, you know, you're torturing him. Like, look what's happening. And he's saying all this in front of my child, right? And in the end, this torture, right, was a non invasive GI workup where basically they were confirming placement of his G tube just to make sure it was in the right place still. And then also they did a study to check his motility. So, like, how things were moving, you know, in his digestive tract. None of it was like crazy invasive. I mean, it was like injecting a dye into his G tube, right? Or x-rays. I mean, like that's not. Anyway, in the end, because again, spoiler alert, he's here and he's amazing. Um, it was just that he needed a change in his feed schedule. I mean, like, really? Because like that also was really hard for me because I was just like, what if I hadn't pushed back? You know what I mean? And been like, I reject this differential. You know, I know that's not what's happening. I mean, because at the time they were feeding him around the clock. And just to be honest, like nobody eats that way. You know what I mean? Like everybody takes breaks from food occasionally. So, anyway, it was really, really, really rough. So I guess that's the best way I can explain it. I mean, because like I said, living it at the bedside is different, of course, than like, you know, like when they round for 2 seconds, you know, and are like, this is what we think's happening because this is what the lab values showed it, you know, from 5 a.m. And okay, here's your, just go on your day. But then it's like, you know, the rest of us, myself, the nurses at the bedside, like we have to live the other 23 hours and, you know, 50 minutes. So, so it was tough. It was really, really tough. And in the end, our last admission was spring of it was April of 2021. And we again had gotten really devastating news. You know, Kyler had been admitted because he had a respiratory infection. It's just like kind of a long story short that I don't want to like take up too much of your time with, but basically they did a lung biopsy and but then they missed the nodule and it was like, oh, it's like it's just again one thing after another. But in the midst of doing all that, they had scanned his brain again, and that MRI was so devastating that they were just like, listen, again, same thing, go home, just make him hospice. You know, he's just compensating for now, but you know, at some point that'll end, and yeah, that's what you should do. And I was just, again, like, I'm not saying that like hospice isn't a very important service for people, but in Kyler's case, it was actually going to take away services. So he wasn't going to get physical therapy as frequently. He wasn't going to get, you know, like
Yeah.
it would have cut down on the services and the amount. And I wanted to optimize him as much as possible. But the biggest thing is that it also never would have changed like how I feel about him and any decisions I would make, you know, end of life anyway. And it certainly wasn't going to change, you know, like my love for my son. I mean, it's just, you don't throw people out like they're broken toys. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
oh, well, that was a good run for 3 years, but all right, guess that's over. Like, no. So even if you get more devastating news or even if more devastating things happen, you you can't underscore, you know, and minimize just how important it is to be there for your person, you know, just to be there and support them. And um you know, this whole experience, while up until this point probably sounds like so dire and it's just like, oh my god, how many more things, and you're supposed to be a newborn screening parent and whatever. It taught me a lot though about, you know, how I because I always thought like I'm a super empathetic nurse and I try to really be there for my patients, but being on the other side of it all and how you get news and how things are delivered, and of course how you want to support, you know, your family member or friend or whatever the case may be. Um, as I say, it just taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how I saw that and then how I felt I was going to best support my son. So the long short of all that is we had again another very inappropriate. It was just so inappropriate. Another like, oh well, this is what's happening with your son, you know, end of life, end of life, end of life, and hospice, hospice. So in the end, he was discharged, pick you to home. I did not make him hospice. I chose to, you know, make sure he, like I said, got all the services that he could so he could maximize his health at the time and mobility. And when I say mobility, maybe not walking, but like stretching and, you know, trying to not become contracted and things like
Yeah.
that. That also can be very painful. And when I tell you, and the other thing too is Kyler had trended down. Like he wasn't even opening his eyes anymore. I mean, I don't know that he understood obviously all these big adult conversations, but he understood like doom and gloom and like people's faces and things like that. and their voices. So we were discharged home and blind, non-ambulatory, nonverbal, right? And then it was also another big part that, again, this could be another whole episode, I'm sure, but the like, how do you manage somebody now this medically complex at home? Like you need private duty nursing, you need supplies, like there's so many things that like no one had ever thought of, or, like even the case manager that discharged us, like we weren't discharged in the best like package. So that also was a really big learning curve when I got home, of like trying to manage all that stuff. But what I will say is that the minute this kid got home, I had vowed to him, I was like, you're going to have to go to doctors. You're going to have to go to doctor's appointments. I was like, but it's mommy's choice that, you're not going to go back to that same hospital anymore. The kid opens his eyes and he's like been back with me ever since.
Huh.
It's like wild.
That is awesome.
I mean, and I have like, in addition to my, of course, just telling you what happened. I mean, I have videos, pictures, like all the way through. And a lot of it sometimes is hard to go back and look at. But then when I see how far he's come, it's also pretty amazing. So, here we are, as I say, 6 years later. Kyler gets better and better and better every year, like does more interactive. I did not give up on vision. I just knew the way he was responding to light that he wasn't truly blind. So, another thing that I can touch back up on with, I love this picture of Jalen, actually. He's so cute. He's got like the best teeth. But, on this medical odyssey of trying to figure out how to deal with visual processing issues. So just as a quick, put a pin in Kyler for 1 second, I think what they're finding more often than they had maybe anticipated. But again, you're getting more of a data collection right now that you've got more newborn screening babies and they're getting further out. And now we're able to follow them through transplant. Even if you're going in asymptomatically, some of these kids are coming out with visual and or auditory processing issues. And in Jalen's case, he has visual processing, and that was really impacting his, learning to read and write and basically do well with it. He doesn't have a problem seeing. That's not the issue. It's how his brain is processing what it's seeing. So, I mean, it's taken me years to finally like figure this one out. But I ended up just seeing this news segment on YouTube about a family down in Florida who also had a child with visual processing. And they ended up seeing a developmental optometrist. And I didn't even know that was a discipline, to be honest with you. So then I was like, well, what are the chances we have one of those close by? And it turned out we do, and only 30 minutes away. So, and then what made it even more interesting is that, and I will say that in New Jersey, we're very lucky that we have a lot of amazing special needs schools in the area. So Kyler goes to school as much as possible. Like the only time he really doesn't is if he doesn't have a nurse that can go with him that day. But Kyler's doing it. Like he really is. So this developmental optometrist had just given a lecture to the staff at Kyler's school, like the week before I found her. And I was like, what are the chances of all this? And she had done all her training in Boston, which is where I had been trying to get Jalen into, the Perkins School of the Blind. So it was just like this really great thing that I had upon that video. And then this doctor came into our lives because Jalen now wears glasses. And he also does vision therapy. So, and I love the way she talks to him, because she talks to him, directly, not like over him. Like she talks to him, and on his level, which is great. Because, he's 13 now. That's another thing. Jalen was 6 when he was transplanted. Now he's 13. It's wild. But, the way she basically described it is that, she's like, you're bright, you are smart, there's nothing wrong with your brain in any of that way. She's like, it's just that, with the visual processing going on, if you picture like a highway from your eyes to your brain, she's like, your highway, it's a little bit of a traffic jam. She's like, so we're going to work together and do these exercises to sort of like, you know, clear out the traffic you jam. So now the cars can just go up and down the highway smoothly. And I thought that was such a great way to like describe
Yeah.
what was going on to him. And so he's been doing vision therapy now for about a year and a half. And that, in addition to getting him into like a school that properly addresses his learning needs and then also addresses his like psychosocial needs. And when I say that, it's just that, you know, and again, that's another whole topic of school stuff, is that, you know, what I find is in the special ed world, or at least where we're living locally, they try to glomp everybody together. So it's like whether you have a physical disability, a cognitive disability, are you verbal, are you nonverbal, you know, whatever it is, we're going to mishmash you kind of all together. I mean, that's not always the case, but like they just kind of didn't know where to place Jalen, because it's like, all right, you walk with a walker now. You have to be catheterized. That already, we don't know what to do. That sounds scary, which it's not. And then on top of that, like you're cognitively intact, but you're having trouble reading and writing, and we just don't know what to do with that. So just good luck to you, guy. And so I've worked for a lot of years to get him into the right school, because he needs to be mainstreamed as much as possible. And so anyway, Jalen's in a really great placement now. And, you know, in the past, and I've been at this with the school district. Sorry, that's just Kyler's pulse ox. You know, they have him reading and writing, like he's not up to grade level, but he has made more progress in the first 7 months or 6 months of school than he has in all these years of people just throwing their hands up and being like, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. So it's just so impressive, you know, like, and it also is a testament to Jalen. I mean, like, he works really hard. But then getting back to Kyler really quickly, my younger guy, where they were like, he's blind, that's it for him. When I met this eye doctor, and I explained, you know, Kyler's history as well, she was like, I'm going to get in there and help you with him too. So Kyler ended up going and seeing a low vision specialist who did what's called rapid VEPs. So visual evoked potentials. And it was showing that Kyler was trying to process what he was seeing, or like the fuzz, I guess, that he was seeing. So Kyler now also wears glasses, and it's kind of amazing because, I mean, I don't exactly know how they, I mean, again, there were ways that I guess they really figure this out, because again, the printout of the evoked potentials and but that said, they have gotten Kyler from 2400 to 2040. Like what? That's crazy. Now his visual field is impacted, right? It's not that of like, you know,
right.
within normal limits. But when Kyler started wearing glasses, I mean, his like desire to be engaged, I mean, and his eyes were so wide for like the first like month that he had these glasses. I mean, it was like wild. It was amazing. It's like Facebook videos when you see kids like hearing and seeing for the first time, and you're like, it's amazing. So, and the cool thing too is that Kyler could see before. So to be able to see your family again and like the people that you recognize, and I mean, it was just awesome. So, yeah, he wears glasses, and he's doing it. Like, they're just both just really incredible kids. And like I said, I follow their lead, you know. Both kids are thriving, you know, they show that they want to engage. They show that, like, you know, like Kyler, when he goes to school, he loves all the stimulation, all the kids. I mean, there's not one thing they don't do with them. I mean, Kyler's been horseback riding, for God's sakes. You know, I mean, like, he does really cool stuff. So, yeah, anyway, that was another one of those where we were given, you know, some information, and we just
my question. Have we been? I feel like have we been back to the shit? I'm gonna excuse my language. The shitty doctor. and then to show up now? Has he ever been back there?
Okay, so to be completely what do I want to say, accurate, it was like 2 shitty conversations by 2 different people.
Yeah.
We won't put it all just on the one.
Okay.
But the first one, to answer your question,
It sticks with me.
yes, I have seen this person. I go to conferences.
Yeah.
I like to be active in that arena. I have to see that doctor,
Right.
over and over and over again. He's never apologized ever. But even if you don't want to apologize, right? Because if it like say like, your ego, your pride, your whatever it is, right? Like I can't speak for whatever it is that prevents him
Right.
from ever apologizing for how that went down. But there's not even like a, hi Kelly, how are your boys doing? Like, how are Kyler and Jalen? You know what I mean? There's not even like the that.
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
It is. Now the other doctor, he doesn't go to these conferences, so at least I don't have to. I mean, I've seen him around, but but again, same thing. There's like nothing. Like just okay, that happened. That's how I talked, and oh well. Meanwhile, the way news is delivered is very important, and again, back to the how we support families, right? And people have to find the team that they feel most comfortable with, right? Because some people are, like a just blunt approach. Some people want more of that like mushy, whatever it is. Families do have to figure out like a team and put their village together that they're comfortable with. That said, I mean, like it's like anything in life, right? Like how we talk to people matters, and
Definitely.
you can be as smart as you want, but if you're like, I don't know,
I've got another word for that, but I'm not saying it.
Right? Like how you treat people completely matters, no matter where you are, like whether you're a doctor, an astronaut, or whatever you are, or my 3-year-old in the bed, right?
Right.
And that was another thing too, is like, even if Kyler was very young, he still deserved dignity. How about like we keep this age appropriate? Like maybe we should have this conversation out in the hallway. Like maybe these are things that shouldn't be said in front of a little
Right.
So as I say, back to sort of the psychosocial and all that stuff. It is important to take pause and think about these issues. And I'm certainly not here to say that like a broad spectrum blanket, like no one's ever talked to us like, respectfully or well or whatever. Like we just had 2 very significant though, like life altering conversations where it just should have and could have been handled much, much better, much better.
Right.
I mean, I will say though that since, like I told you, like when we got home, like Kyler, essentially came back to me and he gets better every year. He is like, he may be even nonverbal, but he will tell you exactly what he's thinking and what, like he, like with his facial gestures or like, mouth movements, he does a lot of clucking and clicking and moving his mouth appropriately.
Yeah.
Like again, you don't have to be verbal to necessarily get your point across. That's for sure.
Definitely.
And is he outside playing kickball? Okay, maybe not. But my son, like I said, goes to school. He's moving his legs voluntarily in a gait trainer. He's like, I get notes home from school that he reached out for a ball 15 times on command. Now, there could be people out there being like, that sucks. Like, that's not great. But when you realize like how low we got to then, build back up, I mean, all these little things that he does are actually like amazing and remarkable. And you got to be there for the small wins too,
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, it's like, as much as of course we want every story to be perfect, right? And we want it to go well for everybody. I mean, unfortunately, though, like in a case like ours, there can be a lot of bumps in the road, right? And how you navigate them, and things like that, it shapes you, and it's also very important. And I just feel very strongly that everything that we've gone through, I don't want it to have ever been in vain. You know what I mean? Like, I want
Yeah.
us to improve the care of anybody. Well, first of all, I always want it to be good in real time for my kids, but I want it to be better for everybody else after us, because I want us to learn from these mistakes. I want us to learn from these experiences. And so, as I say, some people, have, like, it was tough because remember how I told you these support groups were like helpful to me and connecting. When I started going through all this stuff with my kids, I actually, like, I lost a lot of contact with a lot of people because it's almost like they felt like bad luck was catchy or something, right? And it was like tough
Yeah.
because, I mean, we have a core unit of people who have, like, I swear, they've stood by us through thick and thin. And
Yeah, tell us about those people.
yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, there's been like just really remarkable people who they remember when Kyler was talking and dancing, and, like, I used to do videos of our dance parties like almost every day, and I would post them on Facebook. They would like those posts just as much as, like, oh my God, Kyler, like, smiled today. Like, this is crazy. And they'd be like, we believe, like, come on, Kyler, like, you got this, prove them wrong, and it's just, man, those people, like, really helped keep me going, because it was like they're seeing what I'm seeing, like the small wins. And they had remembered Kyler from, the beginning, but they also are now accepting Kyler for who he is now, and loving him just as much. And so,
Great.
so those people have always been, like, near and dear to my heart. But then there's, like, a core group of people where, again, like, I just met them on Facebook. Like, I've never even met some of these people in real life, and yet they've been huge supporters of my boys, like, huge.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's okay. And I mean, or I have, like, ALD mothers that had donated, to a GoFundMe, and then we ended up connecting. And, like there's one parent where, like, I consider her a very close friend. I mean, we've been friends now literally for 6 years, like, ever since he was transplanted, and I've never even met her in real life. But she feels like a bestie, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's amazing. So that's what I was getting back earlier, where it's just a very unique community. And I think the way that we can support each other often it's very profound, and it's like very necessary. I don't know that it's fair to always put that entire sort of responsibility onto patients, like patients and people supporting each other. I will never minimize that. But sometimes it's a lot to be going through something and then still trying to be as, you know what I mean? Like every post and, like, so I just, I take all good vibes and thoughts as they come, because I know a lot of people have a lot of other things going on at the same time. And if you've taken a moment out of your day to like share how you feel about my boys, or be like, oh, that's awesome, Kyler, or that was great, Jalen, like, that means a lot to me, right? Like, because you really
Yeah.
took the time to do that. You didn't have to. Like, you have your own, ish going on. So so yeah, and I just, when I hear other people talk, or, I see some of the other relationships going on, whether I'm tight with these people or not, like, I love it. Like, I think it's great, because everybody, we kind of all need each other, but, like, in the best way possible, so I think we're a really great community in that way. But that said, ALD is not like, it's not different than, like, anything else in life, right? Like, you're not going to love everybody you meet, and you're not going to be best friends with everybody you meet. And it's not just because we have ALD that we have to be,
I mean, we
best
are
friends.
right.
But
We
that
are
said,
better looking than most people, right? People with
Well, I mean,
ALD
there's
are
that.
generally better looking.
You have the
generally smarter.
You have the ALD badass pin to
I mean, that's what
scream
we're
it
saying.
out.
Yep, Ken has the ALD. We are badasses, right?
We
So
really are.
yeah,
We really are.
we're different,
We are.
and
we
we
are.
don't have to be besties.
Well,
but
yeah, I mean, I
supporting
guess
each other is really important. I
no,
agree.
for sure. But I just feel like it's one of those things too where it's like find where your comfort zone is. You know what I mean? Like you don't feel like you have to force it. You know what I mean? Like if somebody is not I want to get out there and be the poster child of ALD or, like I just want to actually forget about this for 6 months and go about my life and that's okay too. You know what I mean? Like I feel like wherever people are and what they're comfortable with,
Well,
is
so
completely fine. Yeah.
yeah,
But at the same
yeah.
time, like you can find your people, even within like your comfort zone,
It's a
is
great
great.
point.
Definitely.
Great
Yeah.
point. I was gonna say, speaking of forgetting about ALD
Yes.
for any amount of time, Ken has a question to ask.
Yes.
The $1 million question. If you could live one day without ALD, what would you do? Which is a lot in your situation.
Well, right. I mean, I think it would be, God, it might be the same thing with kids and without kids. I feel like I would want to go, and I've heard some other people say the same thing. I think I would want to go on like an amazing vacation, right? Like with my children.
Yeah.
I mean, like my older son, for instance, he's crazy. He's so funny. He follows this like tube family on YouTube.
Yeah.
And, it started out with the unwrapped toys or whatever. And then they started endorsement deals. And then they started like going on cruises because we're all paying for it practically with our clicks, right?
Right.
But Jalen was like living vicariously through them, like going on these cruises. So I remember at the end of last year, his teachers were like, we hear you're going on this cruise, a Disney cruise to Barcelona, Spain. We are so looking forward to seeing the pictures and, finding out how it went. And when he got home from school that day, I was like, Jalen, I was like, you know full well that was what the Tube family did. And you told this like creative story. And he's like, I know, but I thought it would be cool. Don't you think we should still do it though? And I was like,
We're going to Barcelona.
I absolutely think you're right. I think oddly enough, because like Kyler's donor was from there.
Right.
It's just like, what are the chances? But I was like, you're onto something though, kid. Like, we should have fun. Like,
Yes, life goals.
have fun, right? So if we didn't have ALD, I mean, and it was a lot like easier to just pick up and go. Like, I would say let's just pick up and go. But then if I were to have a child-free vacation, I would still want to go on vacation. I just want to sit on a beach with like a frozen drink like the size of my head. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm in. Sounds
I
good.
love that. Yeah, I
Right?
like how you differentiated between like with my kids and without my kids. I certainly understand that. So
Right.
yes.
But yeah, I mean, and also if I didn't have to think about ALD, I would be like, I mean, honestly, I think even though we all do the best we can, it still consumes so much of your thoughts of the day. Like even if you're at work and trying to think about other things, there's still some reason why it's going to pop in your head or someone will email or schedule some appointment or blah, 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 blah. So if I didn't have ALD, I just feel like I'd have so much more time to like waste time looking at reels on Instagram or, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
just doing like mindless stuff. But I think that's like everybody, right? Like it's just, I don't know what it is. Like I try to go even one day without thinking about ALD and there's just something. Now,
Well,
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in typical mom fashion, we haven't even talked about your symptoms.
Oh,
And we're kind of running out of time here. So we might have to do
A part two.
a part two
Right.
Waterman story to hear
booking it.
about you, to hear more about your mom.
Of course. Yeah.
And because I
Your
mean
story is just so much. It's yeah.
It's like
but one observation I have
Yep.
from talking to you about your children is that you are so positive
Yeah.
and strong and optimistic. And I just feel
Very
like when
kind of
you're
you.
talking, you've been through so much and you still carry this light about you in thinking about your boys. And it just shines through. I mean, it's really incredible, Kelly. And
Oh,
it's inspiring, to me as a mom, and to know that you've been through so much and still carry this, positivity and optimism about the day to day, but the future as well is just, it's really incredible.
wow. I mean, that's really, really touching. I mean, I can't thank you enough. I mean, that really means a lot. It really does.
You rock.
You rock.
You rock. Just wanted to say you rock. You
Well,
rock.
again, that's very, very kind of you, because I mean, I will say that I try to do my best, right? And I try to power through, and I try to be the best advocate that I can be for, honestly, anyone, right? Like, even in my nursing, I used to try to advocate for my patients, my kids, family members. If I have a friend who needs advocating, like, I will go hard for you. But and I do try to, always think positively about our future and what's going to happen and stuff like that. But I can't lie, I'm also still human. So there are definitely times where, like, I lock myself in the bathroom, I have a good
Of
cry,
course.
right?
Of
And then
course.
I gotta come back out and, like, put the big girl pants back on, and, and begin, like, and resume. But, I don't know, like I said, it's just that I saw people just giving up, you know what I mean, when things got, like, kind of hard. Whereas I was just like, you just don't give up on your people, like, ever. And whatever that looks like, right? So whether, like I said, it's just being there even till the end, whatever that may look like. Um, you just, yeah, you got to be there for your people for sure, but you're right. Like, I don't want to take up all your time with that. I can briefly just touch on myself really quickly. And then if you do want to do a part 2 on females, my mother and whatnot. But I will just say briefly about my mother when she passed away. So the last couple of years of her life, actually, she ended up in a nursing home, and she started out with difficulty with word finding, and then ultimately became nonverbal. And so, even though it's rare, like very rare, for females theoretically to have adrenal insufficiency or cerebral disease, it is thought in my mother's case that, like, possibly these little strokes, like TIAs that she was having, like, maybe that was enough to set off a cerebral cascade, right? Or
Yeah.
something. Because, like, with the boys, they say, like, no major head trauma and things like that. Like, it's just hard to say because it was just, but in the end, it was tough. She looked like she had significant AMN. And I know right now with females, it's like either symptomatic or asymptomatic. Like, we're still working out all the details and the things, but yeah, I mean, it was rough. But that said, in the end, when she passed away, my mom was a teacher. So I knew she was going to want to go on to help others and, teach others as best she can. So I donated her to, at the time it was called the Maryland Brain Bank, and I had gotten that information from our team up in Boston of, like, are there places where we can donate to research to help others, and further research. And so, again, thank God, my mom, good thing. Thankfully, she died when she did, because the very next day there was another blizzard, another snowstorm. So had she not passed away when she did, we wouldn't have been able to, like, get all the pieces
Oh my
in
gosh.
place the way we did, and you know have the tissue procurement done. So I feel good about the fact that, like, like, I know she truly would have wanted to help ensure that nobody else had a life that was kind of as hard as hers was. And then briefly for myself, I don't know, it's really hard to say what's going on with me. So, like, I don't know. I played a lot of sports. I was the nurse. I've got a lot of orthopedic issues. Like, where I'm becoming bionic, like joint by joint by joint, all these transplants and whatnot, or knee replacements, whatever. But so it's hard to say because I do have some peripheral neuropathy in my feet. But I also have some other like stuff coming on that's stemming from like my back, but not in a like ALD, AMN kind of thing, more like mechanical. But I don't know, when they put the tuning fork on my toe, I can't say that I always feel it, to be honest with you. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't.
Same.
So hard to say, right? Like they're like, yeah, maybe that's some ALD creeping in, you know, some AMN, but you know, we'll just follow you. So in my case, I go to Boston and Maryland because I see the two of the doctors that do the most work with females, and I see each of them once a year, but then this way I stagger it, so I'm seeing someone every 6 months.
Yeah.
And my children also go up and down, like well, actually Jalen's more mobile, but you know, we still
Yeah.
go up to Boston because he's on a clinical trial, so he'll be followed forever. And then we also go down to KKI because there's another big ALD specialist, Dr. Gerald Raymond,
Yep.
who was a big, big support in my life. Like initially I would go to him for second opinions and things like that. But then he started to play a bigger role as far as like he's just so caring. I mean, not to say that any of them aren't, but like, God, he's just like, he's been phenomenal, like to both of my children. I mean, like phenomenal. So we see Dr. Raymond as well. And he does telehealth with Kyler. So that, you know, because that way Kyler doesn't have to go through this whole trek down to Maryland. I mean, he just does so many things just to support our family. He's great. I can't say enough great things. But yeah, so like, as I say, as far as I go, there's probably some stuff creeping in. I mean, for sure, you know, I don't know. Hard to say. Some days I can't go to the bathroom. Some days I'm racing to the toilet. I mean, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. ALD.
You know what I'm saying? Like I get a lot of, and I will just say that anything that I say, disclaimer, check with your own medical professional for what might work for you and what meds you're on. That's the nurse in me. But I will say though that the medication that I take, pramipexole, that's for restless leg syndrome, that has helped me significantly with like leg discomfort that I would have at night. And then of course I'm on meds, you know, for the peripheral neuropathy. And even with that, it's just, you know, finding a cocktail that works for you. You know what I mean? Like I trialed 2 meds initially, that didn't help so much, but then I trialed 2 others together and that really helped a lot. So I think always having like that open communication with your providers, like you don't have to just be like, I don't know, they just said the one med. I mean, it's just keep talking it out and like, you know, seeing what your options are and keeping the discussion open, right? I think that's helped a lot as well. So like way back to what I was saying in the way beginning, for so many years though, I was not really probably taking care of myself that great. You know what I mean? It's just like go mode for the boys.
Go.
And then also like, I mean, sleeping in a hospital in those chairs and whatever, like that's miserable. I used to just get in bed with Kyler. I was like, this is crazy. I don't want to be on this fold out chair. And I was like, scooch over, kiddo. Like, let's take a nap and cuddle, right?
Right.
So, but yeah, but I will say that more so now that things are sort of settled a little bit, I do try to take more, you know, more care. Like there is something to be said for putting the oxygen mask on first. And it's not selfish. It's really not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So important. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
You did great.
Aw, thank you.
You did a great job.
Your words were so kind. I mean, that really is touching. Thank you so much. Both of you. Thank you.
Oh, we are all about real voices, real stories on ALD No Limits. And it was great talking to you.
Thank you.
I have a feeling this is to be continued.
Yeah, there's probably going to be a lot of questions.
Okay.
Your story was like the donks, but
that's one way to put it.
Right. I mean,
But don't.
I do want the takeaway though to be exactly what you said though, that it should be positive, right? Because like I said, it may not be exactly like how I pictured maybe life going, right, for my
Yep.
children. However, they're thriving, they're happy, they're like I can squeeze them. Do you know what I mean? Like I can hug them. You know, I had somebody the other day say something about Kyler, like, I don't know, like, what's the life expectancy on this guy anyway? And I was like, what the what? I was like, he's not a fruit or vegetable. Like, what are you talking about? Like, um, actually, someone had said that to me like a little bit longer, but like maybe a couple years ago. But the more recent comment, now that I think about it, was more like, I mean, do you have a plan for the future? I mean, he's going to be dependent on you forever. And I was like, how many parents do you know that no matter what they have going on, they want their children close to them? Like you want them in your life. You know what I mean? Why would that be any different for me as a special needs parent? I love that. Yes, I could hug Kyler every single day. And I hope that goes on forever. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so crazy what people come up with. But that said, I also want the takeaway to be that, like I said, the community is so important. And like, we really are like, we're so there for each other. And then the other thing too is that there are so many supports out there. And I don't mean just like the ALD support group on Facebook, but like there are so many resources out there that I feel like we're not told about. And you have to sort of upon it. And then you hope like, oh, this random parent told me about this one thing, but it opened up this whole great world of like, I just want it to be easier to access care, resources, what you need, no matter like kind of where you are on the spectrum. So whether you're still a newborn screening parent or if you do have very medically complex children, it still should be much easier to access care than it is right now. That's for sure. And I just feel like if it's hard for me as a medical professional, what's it like for lay people sometimes? You know what I mean? Like, I just want it to be easier for like everybody. And so that's like sort of like a mission of mine, that and the psychosocial is I just am like, I'm going to figure out ways to make this better. Like,
Ooh.
Erin Brockovich, the whole thing kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like we're going to figure this out and make it better for like everybody though. So yeah.
All right. To be continued.
Yes, yes, yes. But
Okay.
thank you so, so much. I really am grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you for being with us.
Guys.
Everybody out there, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you next time.
Right.
It should be next week. So
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cut.
Nice.
Cut.
You guys were so patient because our story